This is AFR Talk, and the program is Exploring the Word. We come to you every day, 3 o'clock Central Time. Alex, your time up in North Carolina is 4 o'clock, but we're glad that people are able to listen, and I hope some of them are able to even get their Bibles opened and follow us along as we share from the Word of God. Here we find Moses. He has slain an Egyptian, and he comes out the next day, according to the next verse, verse 13, he finds two Hebrews fighting, and he asks the question, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? Then he finds out the secret's out. The man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must have become known. He had looked both ways. He had listened, but somebody saw him, didn't they?
I know. And don't you know it was like a dagger that went through his heart. He says, surely this thing has become known. Walls have ears and walls have eyes. And this thing, it illustrates that for God's servant to kill, to try to achieve his goal, that wasn't God's plan, was it?
It was not. And then verse 15 is even more emphatic. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. And so this drives Moses away. He leaves and goes to a place called Midian, and he sits down by a well. He's out of the danger zone. But Moses is just I would call him a great guy when it comes to rescuing people. And he was rescued as a 3-month-old little boy, and now he rescues someone as a 40-year-old man. It says, now at verse 16, that at a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. Now, I see the numbers here. It says shepherds and Moses. Charlton Heston may have been a good actor for Cecil D. DeMille to choose to play Moses in the movie The Ten Commandments, because Charlton Heston was a macho man, much of a man. But I get the impression here Moses must have had some of that bravado in him as well, Alex.
Yeah, he was a man's man. I mean, the Bible characters were not wimpy characters at all, were they?
They were not. And Moses he took care of those women. He came to their rescue. And I just think that's neat. Verse 18 says, when the girls returned to their father, Reuel, who is also known as Jethro, he asked them, why have you returned so early today? And they answered, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. Now, I want to make sure our listeners hear this. An Egyptian rescued us. We're looking at Moses, his dress, all of his features that he has is Egyptian, even though he has the heart of a Hebrew. But that's pretty clear, isn't it?
Well, it is, and Moses is having to walk by faith right now because, really he's not yet received as the deliverer of Israel, because in 13 and 14 it's known that he killed an Egyptian, and the Hebrews that were fighting said, hey, are you going to kill us like you did the other one? But yet he's not still part of the hierarchy of Egypt. Let me say this proves that he was God's man. He was not really the son of Pharaoh, even though he was raised in Pharaoh's palace. Because listen, one of the family members of the Pharaoh could have committed an indiscriminate murder like that and gotten away with it. But when Moses killed an Egyptian, instantly his orphan status became known, and Pharaoh was going to kill him. And Bert, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. Friend, when you're under the call of God, you're either with God or you're in no man's land. I mean, really. Moses didn't belong to the world, but he had not yet fully been acclimated into the nation of the Israelites. And when you're And Moses, let me say, he's getting things straight and he's getting in line with God in a big way. But if God's got a call on your life, you either embrace that call or you're really in no man's land. Am I right, Bert?
I would think so. And there's some of us who have been there from time to time when we've moved out from the shadow of his wings and his protection. If you follow God, you want to follow him all the way. And I find Ruel amazing. He says, where is this man? Now, I've got an intriguing mind a little bit, Alex, and I love to find humor. You've been around me long enough. I love it when humor comes out. Now, how many daughters does Ruel have? He has 7, and I think he's wondering, how in the world am I going to marry 7 of them off? And he hears about this strong man that has rescued his daughters that seems to have character. He wants to get to know him, doesn't he?
Well, he does. He says, you look like son-in-law material.
I think that was it. So they go and get him.
Am I right?
I believe you're exactly right. They went and invited him to eat. He evaluated him, and he finds out he's quite a man. And Moses agreed to stay with the man. He didn't have a lot of options, did he? Moses, doesn't God do that sometimes? He squeezes us into to where the decision we make is pretty straightforward. Now, sometimes I've had to make decisions either or, but sometimes God squeezes us. We'll say, this is it, Bert. This is it, Alex. And Moses just didn't have a lot of options, did he?
Well, he didn't. And let me say this, friends. I know we have a lot of people listening that are in the ministry. We have a lot of ministers that listen and maybe some people that are between jobs. And sometimes in life, God will just box you in. And there's humanly speaking, nowhere to go. And let me encourage you during those seasons of your life to really trust God and learn how to wait on God. Because just as the Egyptian slaves for hundreds of years under the oppression of Egypt, they might have thought, there's no hope. And yet God was working behind the scenes providentially and arranging the circumstances and raising up Moses. And for 40 years, Moses was growing up in Pharaoh's palace, and little did they know that while they're out there having to make bricks with straw, God was grooming his deliverer. And even Moses now, who's going to be married to Zipporah and, have to be out there farming for a while, he didn't know it, but God was at work. And God is at work in all of our lives. When circumstances box us in, it might just be the hand of God preparing us for what he's going to do next and how he's going to bless us and how he's going to use us. We've seen it time and again, and friend, you can see it in your life as well.
Verses 23 through 25 tells this story. The king of Egypt dies. In other words, that's good news because, in other words, the bounty that was on Moses' head is kind of lessened. It may be gone away. But verse 23 says, but the Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. And then we hear it, verse 24 and verse 25. Listen, these are beautiful words. God heard their groaning and remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Their groaning, their prayers, God has taken note of it. And now God he's been preparing, but now he's ready to act. I think this is important timing for us to know this as well.
Well, it is. There are 4 verbs here. God heard, God remembered, God looked, and God acknowledged. And God remembered his covenant, and it wasn't like, oh my goodness, I forgot. Back in Genesis 12, I better do something because I promised Abraham I would make of him a great nation. It wasn't that. God knows everything. That's called omniscience, omniscience. God has all knowledge. But it's that God now was the time to reinstigate the work that would lead to the fulfillment of God's promise. God had never forgotten his promise, and God had never abandoned his commitment to the nation of Israel, nor has he abandoned his commitment to us. Bert, I love Galatians 4:4 that says, in the fullness of time, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, to redeem those that are under the law. God always works in the fullness of time. And in this Exodus 2:24-25, I see it's the fullness of time. And God heard their prayers and God acts. And here in this nation, I've got to believe that revival is coming, that God hears the prayers of so many people, and God knows that 55 million humans have been murdered. God knows that there's a battle for morality and really the spiritual DNA of our nation. And so I'm just praying, and I hope everyone listening is praying for those verbs in our case, that God would hear and God would remember and God would look and God would act. He did for Israel, and he can for America.
And I think it reminds us, we get together in church. We have a lot of Bible study, and I love Bible study. That's the reason you and I we really love doing this show, because you and I both love to get into the Word and see what it says, see what it means. We also get together. We love to worship. We love to sing the new worship songs. We love to sing the older hymns that brings us to the knowledge of God. We enjoy hearing the testimony of the changed lives that God has done. But let me make this plea, especially those that are meeting on Tuesday night or Wednesday night. They used to call it nothing but prayer meeting, but now we usually call it midweek worship service or midweek service. Let's implore individuals, especially on Wednesday nights, that let's get together and let's pray. It was the groaning. God heard the groaning of his people. And Alex, you've made that case right now, right before you turned the microphone back over to me, how that we need to pray and seek God. And I believe churches all over America, even those that are pastors and leaders that listen to Exploring the Word, that listen to AFR Talk, what a time for the people of God to come together and pray and seek his face. I think the time is right, don't you?
I do. I really do. And let me say that Proverbs says that the king's heart is in the Lord's hand, like the rivers of water. He turns it whithersoever he will. We need to pray for leaders. We need to pray. And let me say, like our wonderful friend Neil Mauman says, that Christians must be involved in politics. Jesus was involved in politics. We need to pray for our nation, and we need to be informed, and we need to vote, and we need to trust the sovereignty of God, but we need to do what we can do too.
This is Exploring the Word on AFR Talk. Alex McFarland, Bert Harper with you today. We want you to call us. We'll be back for the next 30 minutes receiving your phone calls with your questions and your comments. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned in 2 minutes.